One of the biggest questions facing our world is how do we bring about change? From issues like the climate crisis, poverty, racism, and corruption, although most agree that change is necessary, many are confused about how we should go about it. For hundreds of years, one particular box has served as a vessel for ushering in differing ideologies and perspectives, the ballot box. Throughout history, Americans have turned to the polls when they want to see change in their community. Casting a vote in this box has become a symbol of civic duty, an effort to give a voice to every citizen. Unfortunately, the origins of the voting system in the United States failed to include all Americans. In the past, the civic responsibility of voting was confined to one identity, the white property-owning man. Minority groups of all types faced hardship when trying to cast a ballot, ranging from suspicious rules to physical assault. Certainly, American society has progressed exponentially, but has the U.S., the model for modern democracy, created a completely fair and equal voting system?
I think that people aren't voting because they've kind of developed a distrust of the system and don't see it as important as some of the older generations did.
I feel like a big reason why people don't feel like they should vote or need to vote is because they don't really know the information or the political climate and what's going on. Even just like the most basic things as terminology.
I think voter suppression is probably the main reason that counties have extremely low voter turnout, and I think that plays a lot into Dallas. And not a lot of people know this because no one really talks about it, but Dallas is divided east, north, south, east, west by race, basically. And so it's really interesting to see the areas that do show up to vote in Dallas are predominantly northern Dallas, people that live in northern Dallas, and it's mostly a white community. And it's sad that these other communities, especially in Texas with all the laws of having to have like a certain ID, and I'm not familiar with all of the specifics, but like I think that plays a huge part of it.
It mainly kind of happens through long lines of polls and also lack of information about polls, which kind of makes it inaccessible for a lot of people, as sometimes polls just like suddenly move and people may not have the information to get there, or like they may not have a car and have to take the bus there, and there might not be like public transportation there and things like that, which make it really more difficult for certain people to get to polls.
Information and letting people know how to vote, and trying to address areas in which there probably is a lot of voter suppression, and encourage those communities to realize and recognize the power in voting and what they can do in helping change our nation and make it a better place. So I think getting that education and kind of teaching the people the basics of government will really encourage people to vote.
For me, like I think one way to improve that would be incorporating like civics and like voter registration into A-push classes or into U.S. history classes throughout high schools. I think education is the key step to like make Americans of all like socioeconomic statuses and races and have true equal representation in the voting system. I think that if everyone showed up to vote, our world would be a place where everyone would have the ability to speak their opinions and then act upon them by voting.
If everyone voted, I think that the world would be more fair. I think that more people would have a chance to voice their opinions, and the political stage would be a lot more even and representative of the people's interests.
these minority groups that are like continually disenfranchised would finally have representation that they never previously had, and I feel like that's like a very big step in like equality for all.
Voting is kind of one of the most basic things you can do to have your voice heard. I know in the past, like in the most recent presidential elections, a lot of people just didn't vote because they assumed one candidate would win, and I don't think it's fair to complain about the state of politics unless you did your part, and the biggest thing that you can do is voting.
We are so fortunate to live in America and have this democratic government, and so I think that people who choose not to vote or stay at home on voting and election days, I don't know, I feel like they're kind of just like putting everyone else's work and like the millions of people who have died fighting for freedom and the millions of people who are born in countries where they are controlled by dictators and they don't have the ability to vote, like they're just letting that all go, and they're taking advantage of living in a country where like you're respected and you're valued for being yourself and having an opinion and having your own voice that doesn't have to be like anyone else's because it's uniquely yours, and then not expressing it by voting. And so that's why I think it's so important that everyone should show up at the voting polls and vote, because you have that freedom.
Voting is very important because voting is a privilege, and I believe that the only way that our democracy and our federal system works is if everyone goes out to the polls on election day and voices their opinions, so we can have our full representation in our government.
Some suffragists dedicated their lives to the cause because they wholeheartedly believed that by casting a ballot, each individual was given a voice. They protested for decades, fighting for the change they wished to see in the world, fully believing that access to a seemingly simple box was a fundamental right. The contents of this box truly matter. One slip of paper is an opportunity for the unheard to be heard. One ballot can transform a city, a state, a country, or even the world. America should pay attention to the cracks in the nation's voting system, so that on the next election day, everyone runs to the polls, confident that their opinion matters and that their voice will be heard. Because in the end, regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, or religion, voting, or the lack thereof, impacts all Americans.